Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everyone had a really nice Easter and is having a good week so far. So today we're joined again by Jai Nitai Das. I think he's with us. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much for joining us again. Over to you.
Okay, wow. Hare Krishna, everyone. Wonderful to be with you all again. Hare Krishna, Kenneth Prabhu. Wonderful to see you floating in outer space there, my brother. Hare Krishna. So it's my great honor and privilege to be here with all of you and to be discussing Srimad Bhagavatam again, which is really the light in this age of Kali Yuga, as explained by the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. And of course, we'll discuss a little bit about how amazing Srila Prabhupada is for delivering the Srimad Bhagavatam to us. I'd like to start by chanting the Mangalacharana prayers. If you know these prayers, you can please join in. If not, you can just meditate on the transcendental sound vibration. And then we'll discuss the last chapter, chapter 19 of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitangena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Gena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Mancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patiranam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. Please bear with me for one moment. Okay. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this slide on the full screen here. Okay, so this evening I've been asked to speak in this wonderful assembly. All glories to all of you for taking your valuable time to be here. Before I begin, I would first like to seek blessings from all of the assembled Vaishnavas that you see fit to bestow your mercy upon me so that I can speak something relevant and bona fide from this most exalted scripture, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. Only by the mercy of Vaishnavas is anything possible, so I am therefore seeking all of your blessings. I've been asked to speak, excuse me, on the 19th chapter, which is the last chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's very, very special. I feel very honored. And specifically, this chapter is the appearance of Shukadev Goswami. Although in general, we understand that the Bhagavatam is the conversation between King Parikshit and Shukadev Goswami. But the entire first canto, which is the canto that Srila Prabhupada came to the West with in 3 volumes, Shukadev Goswami doesn't actually speak at all in the first canto. He doesn't speak until the second canto, and that we'll discuss again at the end. So we're going to be preparing ourselves for the appearance of Shukadev Goswami. And we're going to do this in 3 sections, which I'll also explain a little bit more in depth in a moment. But we're going to have a little bit of introspection. So my request to all of you is that this isn't just a spectator sport. Srimad Bhagavatam is relevant, and really the only reason I guess I even interact with the Srimad Bhagavatam is because of its immense relevance and practical application in our personal lives. So we're going to try to put ourselves in the position of Maharaj Parikshit, feel what Maharaj Parikshit is feeling, and try to introspect how we might find ourselves acting or reacting were we put into a similar situation. So like that. So just really a quick recap. I guess last week you must have discussed chapter 18, which is quite a heavy scene in one sense, where we find King Parikshit acting out of his normal character. After traveling through the kingdom, he comes across Shamika Rishi, and who's in deep meditation. Shamika Rishi didn't come out of trance to serve the king, and therefore Parikshit Maharaj put a dead snakeskin around his neck and then left. His son came upon this situation, felt that the king had been offensive to his father, and uttered a horrible curse, and basically cursed King Parikshit to die in 7 days. And thus, the introduction of really the beginning of the Bhagavatam, the beginning of the speaking of the Bhagavatam. And now we're going to look at the mood of King Parikshit having been cursed by a young, in one sense you could say, inexperienced and immature Brahmin boy, but who was very powerful because of his Brahmin tejas, because of his Brahmin Shakti, his Brahmin potency. And actually his father, after coming out of trance and hearing that Shringi had cursed Parikshit Maharaj, rebuked him and chastised him and said, actually, you've made a grave mistake. But the mood with which all of these personalities interacted and dealt with each other is quite potent. So we'll carry on to, this is, actually I won't read through this, but this is just some quotes from the end of the chapter 18. So chapter 19, these are the divisions. First, we're going to look at texts 1 through 7. And we're going to see how Maharaj Parikshit regrets what he did. He then accepts responsibility, and then he renounces. Then texts 8 through 24, Maharaj Parikshit submits to the assembly of sages. And the last section, which we'll be discussing, is text 25 through 40, where Parikshit Maharaj is feeling grateful, and then he inquires from the great Shukadev Goswami. It's also interesting to point out that if you do read the book, whether online or in your hands, at the end of this chapter, you will see this statement there where it says, completed in 3 volumes on February 20th, 1965, the Vyas Puja Day. So this is very powerful. When I read this, even now reading it, my hair is kind of tingling a little bit because it's so powerful when we think that Srila Prabhupada in 1965 was sitting in Vrindavan and the Radha Damodar temple in his rooms, and he had finally completed the first canto in 3 volumes. And this he completed on the Vyas Puja Day. Now, February is not Srila Prabhupada's Vyas Puja Day, and it certainly is in Vyas Puja Day that is usually in June. So this must be the Vyas Puja Day of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, whose appearance day often will fall in February. So this is a very, very special conclusion. The first canto, Srila Prabhupada made the statement that he has put everything we need to become God realized in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So if we read the first canto with rapt attention, as is requested by the acharyas, then we can really make great advancement, because Srila Prabhupada had no idea what was going to happen after he completed the first 3 cantos, and he got them printed and he packed them into a trunk, and he took his bag of rice, puffed rice, his umbrella, and a couple changes of clothes, boarded the Jaladuta to go to New York. He had no idea what would happen. So he put everything he possibly could into this first canto. Now, of course, what happened is once that trunk got opened in New York City and the books started to go out, the spiritual world descended, and Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master sent all of these wonderful Prabhupada disciples that we have now to assist Srila Prabhupada in spreading the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu across the globe. So Srila Prabhupada, once he had completed the first canto in 3 volumes, he explains that he felt ready to go to the West, that he had something to offer to the West. What a courageous personality. We could speak for hours about Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so, excuse me, the first 7 texts, we'll just highlight some of them to remind some of you may not have read through this recently, or on Tuesday, I think you have a reading session. So, regrets, accepts, and renounces. So this is the first division. So, Parikshit Maharaj felt that the act he had committed against the faultless and powerful Brahmin was heinous and uncivilized. Consequently, he was distressed. So this is very powerful, because Parikshit Maharaj was very introspective. Once he returned to the palace, and remember, Parikshit Maharaj isn't just, some Joe Schmo like me. Parikshit Maharaj was the emperor of the entire planet. He was the emperor of the entire planet, and he could have very easily had an arrogant, proud, puffed up demeanor in which he didn't give 2 figs about what some Brahmin who didn't offer him respect that he deserved, thought, or some, whatever. He could have just not been bothered. But actually, he was very introspective because he was a pure-hearted devotee. And he felt that actually what I did was incorrect. It was heinous and uncivilized to put a dead snake skin around the neck of Shamika Rishi. And therefore, he was feeling distress himself. Then he says, I must certainly expect some difficulty to overcome me in the near future. So not only did he feel distressed and feel regret, but he also understood that because of this, I'm probably going to get some reaction. Something is going to happen to me. And he more or less accepted that this was coming. And so he says, therefore, I wish that my kingdom, my strength and riches, that they all burn up immediately by the fire of this Brahman's wrath, so that in the future I may not be guided by such inauspicious attitudes. So again, feeling regret and preparing to renounce whatever needs to be renounced so that he can develop the right consciousness, because he's recognizing I was not in the right consciousness when I acted, and therefore something is going to happen. So better that it comes now and just happens, so that I can change my mentality. So while the king was thus repenting, he received news of his imminent death, which would be due to the bite of a snake bird occasioned by the curse spoken by the sage's son. The king accepted this as good news, for it would be the cause of his indifference toward worldly dealings. So, I mean, this is quite radical, let's be honest. If you get news, when was the last time someone thought it's good news, great news that I'm about to give up my body? You know, people I hear regularly, they go to the doctor, not regularly, but, you know, periodically, and they get news that they've been diagnosed with some illness that means they could leave their body within 1 month, 6 months, a year. Generally, their mood is not, this is good news. So King Parikshit is certainly an exalted person who is functioning on a different level of consciousness. So we have some introspection here. So when I say introspection, what it means is I'm going to ask some questions to you, and I don't expect you to answer them back to me. But what I would like for you to do, if you're taking this seriously, is to write it down, think about it, and make a note somewhere. If you have a notebook, write it in a notebook. If you have your iPad or device handy, write it in the device. But take this seriously. And look, this is so important for our spiritual life. We have to take time to introspect. So the first introspection that I pose is, how do I, means you're asking yourself, how do I deal with such challenges? Means if I make a mistake, or if I interact with someone in a way that later I think, that probably wasn't so correct. What is my mood? What is my mentality? How do I actually deal with such challenges? So please just take a minute to think about that. How do I interact? How do I deal with such challenges when they come to me? Do I accept responsibility for my fault in the conflict or misunderstanding? Or do I just want to push blame on someone else? Is it all their fault? Do I spend more time creating justifications of how I'm right and they're wrong? Or do I actually consider that I'm 100% responsible for my 50% of the problem? Often we don't think quite like that. We think it's always someone else's fault. Often. But how do I accept responsibility? Am I willing to accept responsibility for that? And could I accept a curse as good news? Would I see the Lord's hand in someone cursing me? Now, there might be some inclination when these questions are asked to think, yes, of course, and that may be true. But if we go deeper, we might think that even in our life presently, we may be facing some circumstance or some interaction or some negative dealing or some bad news, or for all I know, even someone who may have offered you a nice curse. Unfortunately, the way of the world is that sometimes altercations happen and people don't always think as favorably of us. It's an interesting thing how our perception, the way we see ourselves and the way that others see us, sometimes can be very, very different. The reality of what they think or what other people think or how they see us and what we think. We may think that we're perfect, but somehow the way that we act or interact with others may cause them distress or anxiety. And so, if that happens, and they don't appreciate it and they send us a curse, are we prepared to see that as good news? Are we open to receiving feedback? Okay, so hopefully you did a little bit of thinking there. So this is the next, with the same division 1. So continuing in this first section, Maharaj Parikshit sat down firmly on the bank of the Ganges to concentrate his mind in Krishna consciousness, rejecting all other practices of self-realization because transcendental loving service to Krishna is the greatest achievement, superseding all other methods. Also, it's interesting to note here, I'm not going to get into it too much, but Jiva Goswami and Srila Prabhupada both explain that although it says the Ganges, it is more likely that Parikshit Maharaj was sitting on the bank of the Jamuna, because the Jamuna runs through Hastinapur or New Delhi, not the Ganga. So it's likely that that's where he was. But that's a conversation for another day. Thus the king, the worthy descendant of the Pandavas, decided once and for all and sat down on the Ganges bank to fast until death and give himself up to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who alone is able to award liberation. So freeing himself from all kinds of associations and attachments, he accepted the vows of a sage. So thus he renounces. So he walked away from his entire kingdom. This is the emperor of the entire world. Now, there was a video done by some devotees years ago, and I think they still give these talks in universities, called If I Had 24 Hours to Live. And so, it's funny that when people were asked, what would you do if you had 24 hours to live? The number one answer was go shopping. So this is what, people do. And then the others were so obnoxious, I probably can't repeat them here. So most people are not thinking, let me go to the bank of the Ganges and hear about Krishna for 24 hours. But this is the mood of Parikshit Maharaj. So introspection number 2, I'm going to do this a little bit quicker, is, am I ready to meet my maker? Quite a scary question, and not a question we often want to talk about. As soon as someone starts talking about this kind of stuff, people, quickly exit. Whoops, got to go to the bathroom. I think I'll check in later and see how you guys are getting on with this conversation. So people don't want to think about it. But we should think, am I ready to meet my maker? Will I sit peacefully as the moment of death approaches? Am I prepared to just sit on the bank of the river? Of course, sitting on the bank of the river Ganges is a little different maybe than sitting on the bank of the river Thames. But am I ready to sit peacefully as death approaches? And if not, my dear devotees, I beg the question of you, how can I prepare myself more? And this is a very important question we should ask ourselves, because whether we like it or not, we are following in the footsteps. Parikshit Maharaj was blessed because he knew he had 7 days to live. We don't know if we have 7 minutes to live. We don't know. So are we prepared? Or are we just thinking, as the conversation between Yamaraj and Yudhisthira Maharaj, that Yudhisthira Maharaj exclaimed, "The most wonderful thing in this world is that we see people all around us leaving, dying, passing on, and somehow or other we think it's not going to happen to me." But unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever our consciousness is focused in, it is going to happen. And are we prepared? If not, how can I be more prepared? Okay, so this next division, the next section we discussed, texts 8 through 24. Maharaj Parikshit submits to the assembled sages. So at that time, all the great-minded thinkers, accompanied by their disciples, and sages who could verily sanctify a place of pilgrimage just by their presence, arrived there on the plea of making a pilgrim's journey. So basically, Maharaj Parikshit was such an exalted person. He was, a descendant of the Pandavas who were such dear associates of Lord Krishna. He was the emperor of the entire world. And this man walked away from his entire kingdom, handed it over to his son, went to the bank of the Ganges in a repentful, remorseful mood in order to achieve enlightenment. And what happens is when a great soul like that decides that he is searching for enlightenment and he's prepared to take such a massive step, it attracted all of these sadhus, all of these great sages. And they came there knowing something amazing is going to happen. And just like tonight, I don't know those of you who are aware, but Havi Prabhu is playing in the Haveli at the manor. And I was thinking, oh, I really want to go see Havi. But I am teaching, learning Bhagavatam. So, and all of you are here joining in. So it's like that when something's going on, you want to get a ticket. They wanted seats right there next to Parikshit Maharaj just to see what was going to happen. And Parikshit Maharaj, he received them all properly and bowed his head to the ground. And he told them that he was preparing to fast until death. And he said that I pray that if I should again take birth in this material world, I will have complete attachment to the unlimited Lord Krishna, association with his devotees, and friendly relations with all living beings. I mean, what a remorseful and repentive mood. He's prepared. Even if I take birth again, I just pray that I'm attached to Krishna, attached to his devotees, and I have changed my mentality to be kind to all living beings. So this is very powerful. And then he says to these sadhus, "O trustworthy brahmanas, I now ask you about my immediate duty. Please, after proper deliberation, tell me of the unalloyed duty of everyone in all circumstances, and specifically of those who are just about to die." So he's saying, I want to know, what am I meant to do now? And all of you great sages, you've gathered here, and I want you to give me some answers. I'm open. I'm receptive. I am ready to hear. And this is such an important state of consciousness for all of us to understand and also want to enter into. Unfortunately, we're not always really prepared to hear, and it takes either a humbling or a humiliating situation to bring us to our knees, where we finally become receptive to actually hearing and realizing I don't have all the answers. In fact, I don't even know a fig of what's going on here. And so this humility is there, and you can see that Parikshit Maharaj is really open to the sages. Now, this is an interesting dynamic that happens here, and I wanted to take us on a little bit of a journey, if you're all ready to go on the journey with me. Now, I know it's late, maybe for some of you it's early, but for some of us it's a little late. And but I'm going to do some reading here. I'm going to read a little bit, because what I want to read and share with you is something that has, for me, really opened up the Bhagavatam. And it's from a book called Brilliant as the Sun by Krishna Dharma and Mother Chintamani Dham, who are both just such wonderful persons, devotees, and Krishna Dharma is a very well-known author. So they took it upon themselves to write the Bhagavatam in a narrative in a way that would be accessible for more people. And they've done such a brilliant job with it. And they, at the beginning of the second canto, the second volume that they did, they give a prologue at the beginning which describes this scene. Because Srila Prabhupada alludes to it, and the Acharyas, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Jiva Goswami, they also allude to the fact that in the beginning, when Parikshit Maharaj was sitting in this assembly, he was surrounded by all these sadhus, but not all the sadhus were bhaktas. They weren't bhakta yogis. They weren't necessarily even devotees. Many of them were impersonalists. Many of them were tyagis, or those who just perform great penances. They were yogis. They were ascetics. There were many different types of transcendentalists. They were not all bhaktas. And therefore, when he asked these two questions initially, he was getting different answers from different persons. So this is very intriguing. And the way that Krishna Dharma Prabhu and Chintamani Mataji explain this, I hope that you'll be willing and able to come on this journey with me while I read, because I found it so uplifting and exciting. So I just wanted to be able to share that with all of you. Can I get a thumbs up if everyone's up for the journey? Okay, I got a few thumbs. That is fantastic. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the sharing on this one for a moment, and I'm going to change over. So just please bear with me, because I want you to be able to see the screen. Okay, so can you see this, everyone? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to skip through. I'm not going to read everything, because we know how it is. Once someone starts reading, it's like, you know, when you were a little kid and your mom or dad or grandma used to read to you, and next thing you know, everyone will be like snoring away. But we don't want that. We want you to stay awake. So we're going to go ahead and get stuck in. Arriving at the bank of the Ganges, accompanied by several court brahmanas, Parikshit, now they say Parikshit instead of Parikshit. It's okay. Prabhupada said you can do that. There's a reason for it. I'm not going to get into it. Parikshit resolved that he would abstain from food, drink, and even rest until death. He was determined to use every remaining moment of his life remembering Krishna. Whenever his mind wandered to thoughts of his family or kingdom, okay, that's going to be hard because this thing's in the way. Yeah. He resolutely brought it back to Krishna. The gods, aware of Parikshit's decision, continually scattered flowers over the earth and beat celestial drums in his honor. As he sat like a great mystic in meditation on the bank of the Ganges, many sages and their disciples arrived there on the pretext of a pilgrimage. Great devotees like Vashishta, Parashara, Vishvamitra, Pippalada, Devala, Parashuram, Artisena, Maitreya, Vyasadeva, Narada, and many others flew in through the airways by their mystic powers, not by British Airways. They knew that saints of Parikshit's caliber rarely appeared on earth. Knowing he would soon return to Krishna's personal abode, Goloka, they were eager to see him before his departure. Great ascetics like Gautama, Shabdana, Uttaya, Indra Pramada, Idmavahu, Medatiti, Bharadwaj, and Sharadwan also arrived desiring to assist Parikshit to attain salvation. Parikshit greeted the sages by bowing his head to the ground before them. He thanked them for coming and praised their magnanimity. When they were seated, Parikshit said, "Trustworthy Brahmanas, please tell me what I should do now. Indeed, tell me of the highest duty of everyone in all circumstances, and specifically of those about to die." So you should remember that from 10 seconds ago. Narada Muni strung a gentle melody on his veena, and he said, "My dear king, simply relish singing Krishna's holy names. Narada, let us be a little more philosophical at this critical moment, chided Gautama. It behooves us to answer this important question thoughtfully, with reason and evidence. Narada merely smiled. Turning to the king, Gautama continued, King Parikshit, only in the human form of life can one solve the problem of suffering. Therefore, this is the most essential duty. The other sages called out an agreement, and Parikshit asked, Pray tell me, wise ones, what is the cause of suffering and how can it be negated? Now, what you're going to see here is if you look, you see Idmavahu, Bharadwaj, Idmavahu, and then all Indra Pramada, all Medatiti, all these different personalities in this will speak. And they go through all different kinds of philosophies. I'm not going to read them all because we could be here for hours. So I'm skipping all that, but I've told you what the book is. You can get it on an audio or like this on Amazon or wherever you get books from, or you can get it in most of our shops. So I'll just get to this part where it says, the debate raged back and forth for some time. Even within the different schools of thought, there were divisions. Those who denied God's personal form had various views, and also among those who accepted Vishnu as the highest reality, there was disagreement. Some thought Vishnu's role was merely to organize and sustain the eternally existing cosmos, awarding the living entities the results of their good and bad works. Others argued that Vishnu was himself the fabric of both material and spiritual reality. Some sages held the view that the highest result of worshiping Vishnu was to go to the celestial regions to enjoy heavenly pleasures. So the debate went on. As the sun began its descent, Narada again spoke. Dear gentlemen, this good king has only 7 days in which to solve the problems of material existence. If we continue to argue, it will not help him. The sages agreed. They all desired Parikshit's welfare, but how could they in good conscience resolve the conflicting viewpoints? Narada suggested that as they all accepted direct perception to be authoritative, they should consult someone who has seen the nature of spirit and matter. Gautama said, This is good, but who amongst us has undeniably seen the truth? Vasishta said, Well, Narada can freely travel between the material and spiritual worlds. Surely his testimony is trustworthy. But Gautama objected. Who can believe Narada? He is known to mislead those who trust him. No, I will only accept the authority of someone whose reputation is untarnished. Narada smiled. No doubt Gautama was remembering the tricky logic he had employed when advising Kamsa that any of Vasudev's sons could be the 8th one prophesied to kill him. He replied, I understand Gautama's objection. I suggest we accept Vyasadeva since he has compiled all the Vedas. But the atheistic sages objected. No, he is an attached householder. We have all heard how piteously he lamented when his son renounced the world. A true knower of the truth is detached from material happiness and distress. Other names were suggested, but for each of them an objection was raised, or the person admitted that he had not yet seen the absolute truth. Gautama said, If someone could be found who has full knowledge and realization of matter and spirit, we would all accept him. But there must be clear evidence of his position. Parikshit asked, How can such a person be recognized? How does he speak and how does he act? Vasishta said, Everything he says is supported by revelation of past seers of truth. Idmavahu agreed and added, Someone who has seen the truth is aloof from bodily pleasures and pains. Bharadwaj gave his view. Everyone concurred. But where could such a person be found? Parikshit's face darkened with dismay. Being of the same view as the devotees in the assembly, he was concerned that so many learned sages did not accept Krishna's supremacy and the importance of surrendering to him. The opinions of those respected thinkers would surely influence the people in general and lead to their degradation after death. However, having already offended Shamika early that morning, he didn't want to risk incurring another curse by taking sides in this debate, nor did he think he could persuade them. So he began praying internally to Krishna. Just then, the sounds of raucous laughter were heard in the distance. The sages looked around and they saw a tall, naked youth walking towards them. He was surrounded by a crowd of jeering women and children who taunted and spat at him. Some threw sticks and stones at him. Barking dogs snapped at his feet. Despite this, his demeanor appeared peaceful and unperturbed as he steadily walked towards the riverbank where Parikshit and the sages were engaged in discussion. Idmavahu said, "It is remarkable how this youth is undisturbed by the abuse hurled at him. Such equanimity is very rare. Indeed, only one who is free from identification with the body and mind could remain so tranquil in the face of such provocation." The others agreed. Intrigued by the comments, Vyasadeva rose and peered carefully at the newcomer with a joyous laugh. He said, "This is my son Shukadeva. He was perfectly self-realized even whilst in his mother's womb. By virtue of his mystic powers, he remained there in her womb for 16 years, fearful of being overcome by ignorance. Only after I was able to give him complete assurance he would not lose his transcendental realization did he take birth." Vyasadeva explained that since his birth, he rarely mixed with conditioned souls, preferring to remain fixed in spiritual trance. The sages who were expert in physiognomy carefully examined Shukadeva. There was no doubt that here was a highly elevated soul. They rejoiced. "It seems that by the arrangement of providence, a seer of the truth has come," exclaimed Gautama. Turning to Parikshit, he added, "Dear king, since you have only 7 days to live, we will listen quietly as you question him. However, there may not be another chance for us to learn from him. Therefore, for our benefit, pray, ask him about all matters concerning reality." Idmavahu, Medititi, and Bharadwaj concurred. Yes, this is a rare opportunity to confirm our understanding of material existence and to learn about subjects which remain mysterious. Knowing that Shukadeva was a great devotee of Krishna, the devotees also agreed to listen quietly. Vyasadeva suggested they make a solemn vow not to start another debate and thus waste the few precious days left to Parikshit. They all agreed. As Shukadeva drew closer, the entire assembly stood up to greet him. Only his father Vyasadeva and Narada and a few other elderly devotees remained seated out of deference to devotional etiquette. When the unruly mob who were taunting Shukadeva saw the sages, they quickly dispersed. Shukadeva first approached his elders, bowing his head to the ground before them. They each embraced and blessed him. Then he in turn embraced his father's disciples and other devotees. Out of all, the non-devotees respectfully touched his feet as he blessed them. When the greetings were completed, Vyasadeva explained the dispute that had arisen amongst them. Since you are an accomplished Brahmavadi since birth, we have all agreed that you should advise the king how to prepare himself for death. The sages gave Shukadeva a seat of honor and invited Parikshit to draw nearer to him. Kneeling before the effulgent saint, Parikshit bowed his head to the ground in submission. After offering Shukadeva heartfelt glorification, he asked, "Great saint, please tell me, what are the duties of one on the verge of death? Please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should avoid." The sun was low in the sky, and a cool breeze blew, rustling the leaves of the surrounding trees. A pair of parrots called nearby, and in the distance, the faint cries of boatmen on the river carried over the placid waters. The king and all the sages sat in expectant silence as Shukadeva prepared to speak. Haribol. Okay. How was that? Was that okay? Thumbs up or thumbs down? What do you think? Yeah? Could you feel it? Could you feel it? Were you there? Were you so transporting, huh? Very well. I really encourage everyone to get all of these books and read them, listen to them, just absorb yourself. Okay, so where are we for time? We've got a few minutes left. We're just going to do the last division, which has kind of already been covered by the reading, but just to put it out there. So this last division, text 25 through 40, feeling grateful, Maharaj Parikshit inquires from the great Shukadeva Goswami. The great Shukadeva Goswami, so this is the third division. By your mercy, we who are but unworthy royalty have become eligible to serve the devotee. So this is Parikshit speaking to Shukadeva Goswami. You are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. I am therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially, for one who is about to die. Please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all of this to me. Sri Sutta Goswami said, now this is Sutta Goswami, because remember this is being narrated by Sutta Goswami to the sages of Naimisharanya. The king thus spoke and questioned the sage using sweet language. Then the great and powerful personality, the son of Vyasadeva, who knew the principles of religion, began his reply. So some reflections on this is that we must find a spiritual master and we must take shelter. We must make inquiries. We must serve the spiritual master, and we must be prepared to surrender our life to the order of Guru. So these are a few reflections on this last section. And of course, as the reading that I just did prepared us, then the great and powerful personality, the son of Vyasadeva, who knew the principles of religion, began his reply. So it's such an amazingly wonderful cliffhanger. I mean, it's the personification of anger. It's just like, oh my God, what did he say? What did he say? What is Shukadeva Goswami going to say? What are his first words? Where is the second canto? Give me that book right now. so, so all of you should be very excited to hear the, learning Bhagavatam second canto talk. So thus ends my talk for the evening. Probably the first and only time I'll ever finish anything on time. Hare Krishna. Did I stop share? Oh, here I am. Okay. So,
everyone. Sorry.
I think we have a little bit of time if there are any reflections or questions or anything like that. I haven't opened the chat yet. I just did. Please raise your virtual hand. Dharm Indra. Okay, you put the stuff in there. Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, perfect. All right,
Robert,
so
can I start off basically?
please.
With the 7 days, it's incredible that all these devotees, etc., got together. Now, when did this 7 days actually start? Because you're sort of thinking that all these people have come together in one place. They must have come from all different parts of India or even the world. But how did that happen? And how did that? It would have taken them virtually more than 7 days to get there. So it's just understanding that concept.
Okay, very nice. Nice question. So my understanding is that the 7 days started from the moment that Shringi uttered the curse. That was it. That was the starting gun. And the clock began ticking down at that point. Now, you can imagine that Shringi uttered the curse. Parikshit went back to the palace. Then Shamika sent a messenger to inform him about the curse. Then he had to renounce. Then he kind of went to the Ganga. So he lost quite a bit of time, inside of that. At the same time, we have to understand that all these personalities that gathered, they were also not ordinary people. And because most all of them, if not all of them, were transcendentalists of some level or another, it means that at one place I read that they had all made a journey there on the plea of pilgrimage. So you know how sometimes it is that you just wind up in the right place at the right time? So these personalities had already been traveling, knowing something. Why am I going here? Yeah, I don't know if anyone's had that experience. Why am I going to this place? And then you get there and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how that happened, but here I am. So for some of them, it was like that. For some of them, it was actually very intentional. They understood what was going to happen, and they went there. They didn't need emails. They didn't need WhatsApp. They didn't need a Zoom call. They just knew. Krishna revealed from within the heart through the transcendental television, that this is what's going on, guys. Get your backsides in gear and get over to the bank of the Ganges near Delhi, near Hastinapur. And as far as distance traveled, well, it explained in the text, and Prabhupada also mentions in the purports, that many of them were traveling in a transcendental way. Some of them were traveling on the airwaves, some down the Ganges itself, using their mystic powers and their mystic potencies. And of course, Narada Muni, he travels all over this universe and any other universe, and inside and outside of the material and spiritual world. So like that, the gathering manifested because of divinity. Ultimately, Krishna called that assembly together through the hearts of all of these personalities, and those who were able to hear that call, they showed up like that.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Does anyone else have another question? If you'd like to raise your hands, please.
Katerina?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. It's nice to see you after a long time. I have a actually question, and the question is, how can we properly enter the mood of Maharaj Parikshit rather than just prematurely imitating him?
Very nice, very nice. And that's a really powerful and important point. We can't just try to imitate, of course, as Srila Prabhupada used to say, that we should follow in the footsteps, but not imitate. We can't actually imitate a situation, but we can try to follow in the footsteps by consciously contemplating the fact that this will happen to me. I don't know how it will happen to me, but I am heading in that direction. What is the saying? Time is a one-way street. It's only going in one direction. We're not going to go backwards. We're not going to turn time back. And each day passing, each setting of the sun we're getting closer to the moment of death. The Bhagavatam explains, for a devotee, though, because a devotee absorbs themselves in topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which are transcendental, timeless, and eternal, because a devotee becomes absorbed in these topics, actually for them, the rising and setting of the sun has no effect. It may appear to have effect externally on the body, but because their consciousness is already wrapped up and absorbed in eternality, they are no longer functioning on the bodily platform. They're already absorbed in the divine, eternal, spiritual realm, and their relationship with Krishna is already developing. So the way that we can follow in the footsteps of Parikshit Maharaj is to try our level best to develop a strong desire to hear about Krishna, Krishna's devotees, Krishna's pastimes, and to chant Krishna's holy name with a sincere and serious heart, free from offenses. And this can be a daily activity, and it should be a daily activity, with each day our efforts and our endeavor sincerely trying to improve, increase, and deepen. And in this way, we will maturely be taking steps to follow in Parikshit Maharaj's footsteps, because at the time of death, this was his sole desire. Just simply, I want to hear the glories of the Lord. If he had had his way in one sense, Parikshit Maharaj would have just tripped off with Vyasadeva and Narada Muni, probably sang bhajans and kirtan for the 7 days, and just got absorbed and got into it. But somehow the Lord had a different plan. The Lord used Parikshit Maharaj as an instrument for preaching or outreaching to all of those different kinds of sages who had different philosophical slants and understandings. He also arranged in such a way that this conversation took place that later became recorded, so that Kali Yuga fallout victims like me would have some hope in this crazy, mad world of some salvation. So Parikshit Maharaj became an instrument. And if we also absorb ourselves in the topics of the Bhagavatam and in hearing and chanting, then the Lord will also use us as instruments. So like that. That is my answer to your question.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay, anyone else wishes to ask a question? If you want to raise your hand. While we're waiting, could I ask another question, if that's all right? What is the backstory of Shukdev Maharaj? Who is he, basically?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you mean who was he before he manifested as Shukadeva Goswami?
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
Well, I don't know all the minute details. I mean, just his appearance in this world from the Bhagavatam. Earlier chapters you would have read about his greatness just in his appearance here. But Shukadev Goswami, it's explained, is Shuka, and Shuka means parrot. And it's described that Shukadev Goswami is actually Srimati Radharani's parrot. So, which is partially it's explained by the acharyas that actually throughout the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimati Radharani's name is never mentioned directly. Simply the word Aradhana is mentioned, and that's the closest that you get to hearing in the actual text of the Bhagavatam, Srimati Radharani's name, because it's described that if Shukadev Goswami, who is so intimately connected in the spiritual world with Srimati Radharani, had mentioned her name, he himself would have gone into such fits of ecstasy that he wouldn't have been able to complete the conversation with Parikshit Maharaj. So therefore, the backstory is that he is the parrot of Srimati Radharani and very intimately connected with her, and specifically sent for the sole purpose of speaking the Bhagavatam in this universe and this Kali Yuga at this time.
Thank you, Prabhu. If I can add another question, if that's okay, while we're sorry about this. Last week, I asked a question about whether Maharaj Parikshit, because I heard this somewhere in a katha, not an ISKCON katha, in a different katha, whether he did this thing about putting the snake around the Maharaj, because he wore Jarasang's crown. Is that sort of something that you've read? Because it was said in that context, and because Kali is allowed to reside in a stolen crown, that was the sort of suggestion made at that point in time. So just wondering whether that is written somewhere, or you've heard of it or not.
Sorry. Yeah, I have not heard that before, and I have no Shastric reference. Srila Prabhupada in his purports is quoting the acharyas. It doesn't mean that other acharyas may not have said that, but Srila Prabhupada quotes the primary or prominent acharyas that in our line that he felt was important for us to hear from. And he explains that Parikshit Maharaj acted out of context, outside of his normal personality, and that it was just divinity. He doesn't say that it was necessarily caused by any material thing, any material influence. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be some backstory to that. I haven't heard that, but it's also explained in the previous chapter and to some extent in this chapter that all three of those persons, Shamika, Shringi, and Parikshit Maharaj, were all under the influence of the Yogamaya potency of the Lord in order to bring about this conversation. And in a similar way, Arjuna and the other Pandavas and Duryodhana and Dronacharya and Bhishma, all of those personalities were also under a certain spell of Yogamaya just to bring about the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna so that the Bhagavad Gita was spoken. So as the saying goes, the Lord moves in mysterious ways. And there are a lot of very deep lessons. If you read this chapter and the purports, then you'll see how Srila Prabhupada also explains like that. But to directly answer your question, no, I haven't heard it. No, I don't know of any Shastric reference, so therefore really can't comment on that specifically. As far as Kali and where Kali can reside, my recollection is that Kali can reside in 5 places, wherever the 4 regulative principles are being broken, means wherever there is illicit sex, wherever there is meat eating, wherever there is gambling, and wherever there is intoxication. And the 5th place is wherever there is gold, and specifically gold being hoarded, so like that. But I haven't heard that he can reside wherever a crown has been stolen or something like that. So.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. It was because it was a golden crown, and that was,
Yeah.
and Jarasangh stole it in essence. That was where I was going from. Okay, Katrina Mataji, would you like to read? Would you like to say your question?
Katerina?
Yes, I have another question. I have a god sister. She lives in Texas, and the husband live in quite secluded area, and the husband has been devotee for over 10 years, but she's very new to Krishna consciousness, and her husband has dementia. So he is slowly starting to forget everything, and his health is deteriorating rather quickly. So I wanted to ask, what would you recommend to them? Because she is basically now becoming the head of the household, because there's no other chance, no other way how to do it. So how to guide her so that she can guide him when needed?
Mm. Wow, what a powerful question. So, I mean, in a sense, I guess there are obviously very many material, practical things that would need to be done, but I'm presuming because you're asking this question here, you're asking from a spiritual perspective, meaning how can she help her? You said they're married or they're partners anyway?
Yes, they got married last year, but they've been together for more than 10 years.
Okay. So, how can she help her husband spiritually? Then, of course, physically trying to create as comfortable a situation as possible. And spiritually, of course, having Srila Prabhupada's chanting going on regularly, incessantly is a good thing, even while sleeping. Reading and spending time hearing together with her husband to the extent that he is able to do that, probably in and out of sleep or whatever other things, maybe some medication may affect him, and just trying to do her best to help him to remember Krishna, be there to comfort him, making prasadam, cooking prasadam, nice offerings, to please him, kirtans, Prabhupada chanting, all of these different things, to try to create that space and that atmosphere.